Hi, Israel Johnson here, and I have no preferred pronoun.
Hi, Sadiksha, she, her pronouns. All the best.
Vansh, congratulations on reaching thus far and good luck.
Right, I do believe that's everybody. I'm now going to invite the teams to introduce themselves with their names, speaking orders, and preferred gender pronouns if you have any. If you do not have a preferred gender pronoun, please do not feel pressure to disclose one. If a speaker does not disclose their preferred gender pronoun, please refer to them using gender neutral language, i.e. they or them, or by referring to them using speaker position. For example, the second op said this, or Deputy Prime Minister said this. All right, starting with team government.
Hi, I'm Arthur Park. I'll be speaking first and last for team proposition. He, him pronouns and verbal POIs, please. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Jian. I'll be the DPR of today's debate, and I go by she, her pronouns, and I would prefer verbal POIs.
Hi, I'm Alex Jung. He and pronouns and verbal POIs for me as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And opposition speakers, whenever you're...
Good. Hi everyone. My name is Ashwin. I'll be going op one and op reply. Preferred pronouns they, them. PO is in chat for all three of us, and looking forward to a good debate.
Hi everyone, my name is Chanidu. I'll be going up to he, him pronouns.
She, her.
Phenomenal. And just one last thing, because Allcom just let me know. Apparently this round is going to be recorded. If you guys can just put in the chat whether or not you consent to being recorded, and they will sort of go by that. That is to say, like, for example, if there's one speaker who does not consent to being recorded, then we probably pause the recording. However, like, if the majority of people do not consent to recording, then we probably just like not record the round. So just like text in the chat, either way is fine. Just say whatever your preferences are. So we'll give you like 30 seconds to do. All right, Hope, would you be able to let me know if you guys consent to recording? All right, phenomenal. Everybody consents to recording or please with that. I also will note for speakers that if after the round for any reason like that, as in for whatever reason, if it's something in your speakers or something afterward, so you have the option to redact your consent retroactively. So if that happens, please text either myself or a member of Allcom, and in that case, your speaker will be redacted after the fact. All right, as you guys know, standing orders are standard, which is to say 8 minutes. After 8 minutes and 15 seconds, we will stop writing, so nothing after that point will be credited. So please stop after that point. I'm not going to be putting time signals in the chat. Any of my panelists are welcome to do so, but I will be focusing on writing down your arguments. All right, unless you guys have any further questions or burning existential doubts, I call this house to order and invite the Prime Minister to begin the round. Here, here.
Hi, just checking that I'm audible. Okay, I'm gonna assume I'm audible. He, him pronouns and verbal POIs, please. Thank you. If everyone's ready, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. We don't deny that the development of AI has made life simpler, but when it comes to further development, the destruction of jobs, the sacrifice of human-to-human interaction, and the perpetuation of further violence, we say oppose the further development of AI. Artificial intelligence robs tangible interactions that keeps the most vulnerable alive, which is proud to stand our proposition. Couple of things that we're going to do in this speech. First, on our team stance, and second, I'm going to forward 2 substantive arguments. First argument on why the development of AI is likely to lead to harms that are applied disproportionately to individuals. My second argument is going to talk to you about how this perpetuates violence against the most vulnerable in society. Before all of that though, what's our team stance? Our stance is simple. We oppose all future development of AI from all sectors. That means we would disallow improvement of things like open AIs like ChatGPT or Linda or any AI systems that exist currently in the status quo. Obviously, we're going to be opposing all of that. First argument then on why the development of AI is likely to lead to harms that are applied disproportionately. Premise. Note that AI is often only coded and touched by the richest elites because of the very niche sector that requires actual schooling in order to enter that field. Not all schools, for example, provide you with such an education, and if the industry expands, it's likely that richer have the first mover advantage. Importantly, the development of AI leads to the ability for individuals to abuse the system, but perhaps more importantly, allows the individual system to abuse society overall. There are multiple harms and risks that come with AI that opposition needs to prove why there isn't an incentive or systematic likelihood that these harms are not likely to occur. We're going to put forward 3 main things. First, I want to talk about privacy values. The ability for AI to manually collect data has been seen improving at an extremely alarming rate, right? This means that they're able to be coded for data collection up to a level where they can establish literally like who you are to an extremely close-up percentage. This looks like knowing your daily patterns of where you go, where you live, what you purchase, what you watch, all of these things. Much like how Google already uses AI systems in order to determine habits of individual consumers and thus use that information for themselves. AI systems improving means to the extent that they can literally tell who you are and can pinpoint your exact identity. This is likely to happen because of the fact that individuals largely want to access these services, or even if they can say that sometimes there can be warnings written in sections of the usage agreement, is oftentimes ignored by individuals because of the fact that they need to be involved. This leads to more individuals having their private data and information compromised. And that in and of itself is a harm because of the fact that a lot of these leaking of such private data, which note both sides can never guarantee a protection against because there are hackers all over the world who are still able to beat the smartest security AIs that exist in the status quo. You expose individuals to things like loan sharks, for example, who falsely claim to assist you and pray for your downfall. You disallow individuals to access things like mortgages because they have a background of living in impoverished areas where the rate at which the income roll in isn't as high as other areas as well. These are tangible harms that comes when privacy is compromised to such an extent that individual identities are literally exposed to the world. I think this is exacerbated under side opposition where the AI is further developed and they can actually track your exact identity. I'll take you a little bit later. Our second point I want to talk about here is this idea about job loss, because the fact that AI systems have become so advanced that they can be coded for almost anything means that there is a likelihood of immense job loss. And we have AI that has literally been proven to be able to automate like all the manual labor for individuals in blue collar jobs, for example, have been working on, right? Note how this is disproportionately harmful to the people on the ground, because individuals who cannot access AI technology because it becomes exclusive for the rich because of its high potential of return, which means that the elites would probably want to keep it for themselves and make sure it's less accessible, leading to things like price gouging. Means that you further oppress the individuals on the ground who would then be void with the opportunities to learn how to work with AI and are then forced into the worst forms of labor. Note, AI is already controlled by the rich, which means that the main AI systems have already been developed, largely focused on solving problems for the rich to make everything cheaper for them, which is why the jobs of the poor is oftentimes the first to go, and why AI is unlikely to offer assistance to the poor, because for the rich, first mover advantage in this market is just that much more appealing. Before I move on to the third point on how you lose the human experience though, I'll take a point if you have one.
Many of your problems regarding artificial intelligence, such as its use in data collection and its resulting effects of unemployment, are issues with existing levels of AI. Assuming it were possible, would you also discontinue all existing AI and automation?
Okay, obviously we're saying that to some extent we have been able to develop AI and they have been beneficial to society. What we're not agreeing with is the further development of AI, where to the extent of which you can literally pinpoint their exact identity, where they're coming from, where they live, and all of their private information is compromised. I think that's when it becomes further more dangerous. I don't think that's what we need to defend. Third thing on the loss of human experience. Imagine living in a world where you talk to AI computers and AI systems that exist in all parts of your life. This looks like in countries like Sweden or Denmark, for example, where AI is already implemented in schools to teach things like interpersonal human communication. You lose the touch of human communication because you become overly dependent and reliant on AI to forward your daily livelihood. This is a harm because without human experience, it means less human interaction with one another, a world where sympathy is lost because you're just talking to another computer screen or another humanoid lookalike. Just a world where emotions, which can be coded in by people before, so are completely like controlled by individuals who coded it, become less and less important, especially when the purpose of AI just becomes to solve your daily issues, right? They think the impact is very clear. AI disallows individuals on the ground to combat things like wealth disparity, because for the development of it means that the price is likely to increase as industry becomes bigger. You crucially don't allow individuals to access such information. If AI can be developed to the extent of which they can literally leverage all the information against the most vulnerable, because they have all the ways to indeed, for example, forward code or indeed code like this, have this information be able to be implemented through the AI systems, and the rich individuals are able to take control of all of that, I think the harms are perpetually more violent against the most vulnerable. Comparatively, we're able to control AI because it's not so advanced to the point at which it can be under their side of the house and can't operate entirely by itself. You still need human interactions in order to develop yourself. That's something that's exclusive to our side of the house. Second argument then on how this perpetuates violence to the most vulnerable. Premise. Ultimately, AI is coded by people, and it's likely that rich white individuals who control almost all AI are likely to perpetuate violence against the most vulnerable. We first want to touch upon this idea of wars and global violence, right? We think already to a certain extent, lots of developed countries, like for example, the US, are trying to develop more high-end military technology, such as automated drones that don't necessarily need human control. Globally, there's a higher percentage for exploitation regarding AI technology, especially for the weaponization of technology and war tactics or AI-run drone attacks. There's possibility of malicious usage coming from unjust or corrupt governments if they do manage to obtain it. I think this also creates a global power imbalance in the international community itself by giving so much more political and also military power to developed countries who hold probably a monopoly of all of this AI-controlled information and AI data and the code for these AIs, right? Why does this increase conflict then? Within the status quo, the reason why most people are hesitant to start conflict or continue conflict is because they realize it's their own family members who are in the military, or it's actual human beings whose lives matter, right? That's why it's also harder for the government to initiate attacks, because of the immense public pressure on them to protect the lives of the military as much as possible. But know how AI don't feel pain or are living beings, which means there's a high lack of sympathy for AI. That means it's a lot easier for governments and people to mindlessly send out AI to attack other places and hence massively increase the scale of conflict. Second thing I want to talk about here is this idea of discrimination. That tool used AI, artificial intelligence, to find candidates by ranking them from 1 to 5 stars within Amazon stores, right? For example, like shopper race products on Amazon. We say a lot of these things were discriminatory against individuals like women because Amazon's computer models were trained to vet applicants by observing patterns in resumes submitted to the company over like a 10-year period, effectively preferring male candidates and penalizing resumes that included the word woman. Regardless of whether it's intentional or not, it doesn't change the fact that implicit bias does affect development of technology, especially because in the end, it is humans behind the development of all this AI tech. It's also the reality and status quo that people who develop AI are the privileged ones with money and time, most likely being rich, right?
It's first speaker right now.
Cis male. Okay, I'm going to continue. There's a root problem that further development isn't going to solve. As AI develops over time, the system becomes biased, even if it's not due to code, because AI is based on the learning of response patterns, which are also inherently biased or skewed towards the majority in a beneficial way. We say AI is then inherently reflective of human behavior, which prevents it from being completely unbiased under their side of the house. At the end of the day, artificial intelligence robs tangible interactions that keeps the most vulnerable alive. We're proud to stand on front.
All right, thank you, speaker. Leader of opposition, when you're ready.
Hi, it doesn't seem like it's possible for us to turn our camera on because it says video chat isn't available for more than 25 users. Just wondering what you want us to do.
Sorry, you cut out in the middle of that. Is everything all right?
Hi, no, I was just saying that it doesn't seem that it's possible for us to turn our camera on because it says video chat isn't available for more than 25 users. I was just wondering what you wanted us to do.
It's totally fine. Just like if we don't need video chat, we can just assume we'll continue as it goes.
Sure thing. Okay. Hi, I hope that you can hear me. It's unfortunate that you can't see me, but let me make do. Just checking that I can be heard.
Yes, sir.
Cool. At the top of this speech, I want to make clear that AI in status quo is actually very, very, very rudimentary and very, very, very basic. I understand that people had a little bit of outcry at ChatGPT, but realistically, that isn't a very big deal. Text files were the first things that we developed with computers. Obviously, text files are going to be the first things that we develop with artificial intelligence. In the vast majority of areas in status quo, artificial intelligence is in its initial stages, which means that if we halt it, any benefit we can gain from artificial intelligence in the future is very, very, very limited. I want to make clear in terms of framing what particularly AI looks like in status quo, which is to say that the vast majority of AI is precise AI. That is to say, AI made for specific tasks, whether it's decoding protein cells, formatting text, or doing things like creating farming methods or self-driving cars. That is the form of AI we see in status quo and the form of AI that is likely to grow. The third thing I want to note is just what development of AI looks like. So this looks like improving existing self-learning algorithms, creating new forms of AI technology, and applying AI in new fields, for example, medicine. What is our stance then? We support the development of artificial intelligence. We also support restrictions on how artificial intelligence is created and ensuring that it is ethical. We'll prove why this is likely in our second argument. And last thing we want to make clear is that this debate is about, from this point in time, looking at the AI we have now, whether we should continue or not. We are fine with some point in the future revisiting this debate if we think that AI has the potential to be dangerous then. But at this point in time, we are completely fine with continuing with AI development. Few areas of response then before I move into argumentation. First then to their argument in terms of disproportionate harm. The first thing I want to note is that it is just not true that artificial intelligence right now is made by the elite in society. In the vast majority of cases, like they concede, artificial intelligence is made by open source systems like OpenAI that allow absolutely anyone with some sort of computer science background to get involved, including individuals who have just taught themselves online. But even if that was not true, when the issue comes to privacy, we're going to prove in our second argument why you're likely to get more regulation in the future when it becomes widely used, the same way we got regulations for browsers, cars, computers, the internet, etc. If their problem is using background data to make value judgments, we're going to prove that humans do that much, much worse. Secondly, to that thing about job losses, we can see that automation and job loss is bad in the short term, but we think that automation and job loss is just necessary for every single stage of human development. Even during the industrial era, we do think and realize that there were issues or there were concerns about job losses. But all the benefits we've been able to gain from that, the ability for humans to have extended their lifespan beyond 40 years into the 80s is a unique benefit we gain from that. I also want to note that this isn't just made by the rich, and it isn't just made for the rich either. The types of technology we're trying to get from AI and currently work on help everyone. Things like medicine, for example, things like self-sustaining farming. We also think that just economically this argument doesn't make sense, because in a capitalist system, there's always an incentive for new jobs to be created, because economies need people to have jobs so that they have money to buy more stuff and continue the economy. So we're never going to end up in this weird dystopia where people don't have any job whatsoever. The last thing here is to their point on lots of human interaction. The problem with this argument is they establish that AI can be used to replace human interaction, for example, in classrooms. But if that is the case, then it has to include things like sympathy and empathy already. So we don't really see what the issue is. But even if that was an issue, we think people are going to want human interaction to some degree, right? There's only so long you can talk to an artificial intelligence before you want to talk to a human. And if you do not, that probably means the artificial intelligence is a good enough simulation of a human being that we think it's completely fine. Okay, I'm going to rebut their second argument when I get to my second argument because they overlap very nicely. Before that, I'll take a POI. Okay, first argument as to why we get the benefits of further development of artificial intelligence and why that is a good thing. In terms of framing, I want to note two things. One, that the necessity to create artificial intelligence comes from the limits that exist to human intelligence and problem solving, whether it be in physics, math, astronomy, medicine, and so on, where people wanted to overcome the barriers of the human mind. The second is that we're just following a trend of increased use of machines to make our lives easier. What do I then do we think AI is uniquely beneficial? 5 key mechanisms. The first is machine learning and neural networks means that we don't have to understand how the machine gets to the solution, only the solution that it gets, which significantly reduces the mental strain that humans have to do. For example, for AI that decodes protein cells. Second mechanism is that you reduce the computing power that is necessary. For example, with current algorithms in mathematics, you need to put out the entire algorithm before it is processed. For AI, you just give it point A and point B and it solves it itself, which just means a huge amount more efficiency. The third thing is that AI can self-correct, which means it can review its own solutions and improve over time, whereas a human written code requires perpetual and constant intervention to be successful. The fourth thing is that it is much faster than human reasoning because it uses processing power to do humanoid tasks and lets us get stuff done much, much faster. The fifth reason is that it eliminates biases in human decision making. This is where I'm going to sort of rebut their second argument, where they talk about things like biases against women, for example. The problem here is that human beings feel emotion and fatigue. Machines and artificial intelligence does not. But even if it does, here's the unique benefit of artificial intelligence. It is that artificial intelligence can learn to unlearn its own biases. The problem on their side of the house is that they're not eliminating computers. They're only eliminating artificial intelligence, which means that algorithms will exist on their side of the house, and algorithms existing means they will continue just doubling the biases that human beings have. At least artificial intelligence has the opportunity to unlearn those biases because of self-selection that only exists on our side of the house. The conclusion of this argument is just that by proxy, development of artificial intelligence means you get more of these benefits, which means you get more innovation and faster solutions to problems like farming networks and climate change. Before my second argument, yeah, sure.
AI is a niche industry that requires specialized studies that are often exclusive to the rich and not to poor individuals who unlikely have access to AI because of the lucrative nature of the business, like law and like medicine.
But that is just not true. If you have any sort of coding background, for example, if you want to teach yourself coding online, that allows you to, through an open source network, engage in artificial intelligence development. AI isn't controlled by companies right now, panel. It's open source and it's like community created solutions. We think that over time, this means that you're going to get an open source creation of AI and more accessibility to it. So, second argument as to why this is better regulated, we think in general, regulation of AI is an uphill battle at the moment, but we make it better. The first reason we make it better is that more people use artificial intelligence. When more people use artificial intelligence, governments are going to feel a greater need to address issues with AI because people feel it's a bigger issue that affects them. This is why AI regulation advocates are better able to see things improve. This is, for example, in ChatGPT situation, the only instance where we were able to regulate it was after a large amount of people used it because it was developed so further, and then universities found out, and now we have algorithms that can correct for ChatGPT and ensure that people don't use it for writing their essays. Second mechanism is that further development increases scrutiny. Very simply, when you put a lot of money into an investment, people want to make sure that money is used well, especially when governments are the ones subsidizing it with taxpayer money. The third thing here is just overall better regulation. The problem right now is that current development of AI can be used for bad purposes. For example, AI in war. The problem is their side can't uninvent this technology. When you stop development, this is when people care less about regulating this technology, and governments can continue to use AI drones with impunity. Even if there is some pushback on their side of the house, down the line, there's a lot of harm and a lot of civilians that die in the interim. On our side of the house, when it becomes widely used, that is when you get international charters, for example, that regulate the use of AI, which is why we think it is much, much better. And that is why we think you are likely to be able to have better regulation of AI only in a world where you develop it further. For all of these reasons, oppose.
Right, sorry about that. Thanks for that fine speech. Now invite the Deputy Prime Minister whenever you're ready.
Hi. Am I both? Oh wait, sorry. Am I audible? Okay. I would prefer verbal POIs, and with that, I'll be starting my speech in clear. 3, 2, 1. Speaker, we think it's unfair to opt to claim that they can come back to this debate anytime, especially when they don't set a time frame and can literally say they will come back 1 month later, if they believe that AI has significantly improved or developed within that time frame. We think that it's unfair for them to say that AI is so beneficial, yet they always have the option to claim that AI should be stopped. And that's why, before I go on to anything, I'm going to clarify about how we're able to currently control AI under our world, because it's been questioned through a POI. We want to make this clear, so we're not accused of being wishy-washy. We think the delta between the two worlds is that under ours, people are painfully aware about the shortcomings of AI and the problems that exist. With the same capacity that we were able to develop AI, we still have legislations or consensus that applies to it. The point in which this changes is where development continues and increases exponentially as more people take interest or enter this lucrative market, and society isn't able to form clear ideas or consensus to keep up with that same type of level of development, which is why those international charters aren't able to be developed within the time to be able to prevent the risks that we already tell you about. And we think that this is also clear when Elo concedes that it's going to be very rudimentary and basic under our own, which is exactly why we prevent the large-scale harms that are very possible under theirs. Then first, I'm going to explain to you how does this likely violate the human aspects preserved by society under their world. And second, I'm going to relate to you who better protects the vulnerable actors within society. First, let's start with how this violates the human aspects under their world. I think Arthur tells you mainly 3 things. First, about the risk of privacy and the potential harm that comes from every aspect of life that can be utilized through this technology. Second, job loss, about why manual labor is the fastest to disappear, preventing the poor from being able to engage when they lose opportunities. And third, the loss of human experience, where you lose touch of human and consensus. And that's the point where you can no longer communicate as a society or create change when it's a repetition of AI. First, let's start with privacy. I'll take you later. They tell you that regulation is possible because there's a large opt-in, and that's exactly where you're going to be able to control these types of things. I think I've already established to you enough why it's most likely that people in society cannot keep up, especially with the current technological revolution that has already been happening. The individuals that are most marginalized or don't have access to the same level of technology are simply not able to keep up with society, which is why I think opt-in is limited to a certain extent. But furthermore, this type of regulation is so unclear, especially because you're not necessarily able to evaluate exactly how much AI has progressed, because you don't have a database of how much you're able to complete or how much you're able to accomplish at this time. We think that there's also there's a factor of private corporations who are already conducting research and development within private, which also makes it harder for you to be able to compute exactly what point in time you are at and the type of risks that come from that. I'll take you later. Second, about job loss. They tell you that automation and job loss is natural, and that's something that's already happened within society. We think that the reason why, firstly, for the instance of the Industrial Revolution, it was okay or was able to be sustained was because there were new jobs that were created from such development, and there was a limit to the replacement that happened, meaning that people still opted for human workers to a certain extent, where they thought that they were better at certain jobs that required problem solving or being able to make such decisions. We think that the root problem under their world is that minorities cannot reach the level of education that opens up the job opportunities at the top, even if there are more jobs in general, because the whole type of consensus is that the only jobs that they are able to access within the first place is blue-collar jobs, where that's the only type of things they can access with their education. We think that that's exactly why it systematically pushes them out of this industrial revolution or technological revolution that pushes the rest of society forward. Last, about the loss of human identities or interactions, they tell you that because people inherently want empathy, sympathy, and human interaction, it's likely to exist. First, we think it's possible for AI to copy human interaction to a certain extent, such as discussions or helping and pretending to be empathetic, but we don't think that humans are able to have the exclusive discussions that move on from the change that happens. So the point important that's to notice here within the loss of human interactions judge is not necessarily that you can't actually have discussions with the AI. It's that you're not able to have discussions that progress further than what has already been said, because what the AI can do or repeat back to you is by analyzing the patterns of what has already happened, and therefore they cannot suggest things, or there's a limit to the type of creativity or the scope that they're able to engage with. And that's exactly the problem that, of course, where people are normalized to these discussions with AI already, such as chatbots or Siri. But before I move on, I'll take a POI.
The internet and online shopping led to millions of job losses because brick and mortar shops around the world shut down, but still gave people a greater access to goods and services. Do you regret and oppose internet shopping?
Okay, I think this just really has to do with the level of harms that you're able to have. We think that even if we do consider the fact that we still have things like internet shopping, the reason why this is a complete different scale of harm as to the ones that we proposed just now is because we give you so many different as to why different levels of people are strongly affected. So for instance, even if we do concede that job loss is going to be somewhat symmetric, even though it's not, from the point in which the poor simply cannot access any jobs as all manual labor is lost. But furthermore, there's the loss of human interaction or the privacy that affects all individuals, regardless of whether they're poor, regardless of their socioeconomic status. We think that's exactly why these harms should be furthermore prioritized. But second, let's talk about who better protects the vulnerable actors within society. First, I'll tell you that through the development of AI, discrimination or disparities can be improved rather than the AI that currently exists. I think Arthur already gives you two structural reasons why this won't work. First, the individual who developed the AI are inherently biased. This is reflected in the factors that you deem important, for instance, when you put in the weight of certain values or aspects that hold over others when decision making, or even through the standards that utilize biased decisions of the past. We think that it's these implicit reasons that maybe even if you're not trying to be racist, even if you're not trying to be biased, it's still going to be reflective to a certain extent within these systems. Second, AI or self-learning technology operates and constantly improves by reflecting the input they receive, meaning majority still has the strongest control over what is represented by AI, which means that even if you unlearn the past types of discrimination, you're still going to relearn the type of discrimination or bias that is input into you constantly by the majority. Then there are 3 points under this clash. Firstly, to the response that AI is usually made by OpenAI and therefore it should be accessible. Second, about why bias still exists under our world. And last, the risk of AI that allows for malicious exploitation. First, let's talk about AI because opposition claims that OpenAI is supposed to be accessible to all individuals and therefore reduces our first claim that the individuals who develop the AI are inherently biased. One, it doesn't change the fact that there's inherent bias behind every person, even if we do concede that it's not only going to be the rich individuals. But second, the people who still gain the most access to such technology, education, or opportunity is going to be skewed to the majority or the individuals most privileged. You're not going to enter the industry within the first place as a marginalized individual because the entry barrier is so high. And there's already so many corporations that exist. Even if you do have a coding background, or even if you do have a certain level of education, which we already see is less likely to be successful compared to the individuals who already have an extensive knowledge within certain fields. Second, they tell you that bias exists under our world, and AIs can always unlearn biases. We think opposition team completely asserts at this point because it's unclear why AIs can just unlearn biases when AIs learn things based on the feedback, which is why under our world, although we understand or although we can see that the bias under AI exists, the public is able to recognize that certain bias exists, and that's exactly why we're already so relevant. We already recognize the types of problems that exist, and we're able to improve this in a better way. Last, the risk of AI is that allows for malicious exploitation. We think that the problem that comes with this is that not only does opposition not respond directly, they give you a bunch of benefits on reducing computing power or better machinery, but they don't engage with the value that we tell you of these harms that is so much more important than being able to have efficient computing like in mathematics. The extent of this benefit is completely unclear insofar as they're unable to apply this to the tangible real world. These benefits are outweighed by all the harm we give you, literally that people are losing jobs, they're becoming unemployed, that there's going to more likely be more war. Up just can't trade this on under the premise those things always happen within human history, especially when we already proved to you that hackers are, for instance, able to utilize systems to tamper with governments. AI weaponry that is highly efficient and that is going to be continued to be developed, especially within countries that have the most amount of political power or economic ability. We think that's why artificial intelligence robs the tangible interruptions that keep the most vulnerable alive, and I'm very proud to propose. Thank you for listening.
Great, thanks, Speaker, for that fine speech. I just want to note that there's been another note from Allcom that is just that we are going to be asking observers to leave this poll so that then if you want to observe, you can observe by watching the live stream on YouTube that Jack just sent the link to. The reason for this is so that the speakers can turn their cameras on again, because there's a hard limit on how many people you can have in a call while having cameras enabled. So if you are an observer in the round, please leave this call, and then we will continue the round in just like 2 moments. Phenomenal. We will now get started again, inviting the Deputy Leader of Opposition whenever you're ready. Be here.
Hi, can everyone hear me if I speak like this?
Yep.
Thank you. And thanks again for giving us a chance. I'll take you as well, please. Three areas of response in this speech. First, on whether the further development of AI will be done in a way that is beneficial for the vast majority of people. Secondly, on whether AI can be effectively regulated. Thirdly, on whether the further development of AI will boost economic growth. But before that, I want to make a clarification about the supposed squirreling of the motion that we've done through our stance. To be clear, based on the current future projection of where further developments of AI will go and the horizon to which we can see, our claim was that the motion only asks us to defend making the decision of whether to further develop or restrict the development of AI at the present moment. As far as we see it, very well into the future, it's likely that we will continue to develop AI. But it's fair for us to reserve the right to make this decision at a further point in time where reasonably the horizon has been extended and our current evaluation of the further development of AI monumentally changes. So to be clear, we can still defend this motion because the motion asks us to defend making this decision at the present moment. The second thing that I want to point out at the top of this speech is that all of the examples that side proposition uses of instances where AI has been used malevolently and exploitatively are based on AI technologies that already exist. They're examples of automated drones, of large companies like Walmart using predictive algorithms to violate people's privacy and determine consumption strategies. The use of AI as teachers and its limits on human interaction are all existing applications of AI that has already been developed that they cannot uninvent on their side of the house. The point that I want to make is that it's very unclear why the immediate further development of this very same AI will be the tipping point in worsening all of these harms to the extent to which it negates all of the benefits that we talked to you about of further developing AI and increasing its applicability in fields to which it has previously not been applied at all. Given how rudimentary the AI that we currently have is, given that it is not general AI that has the capacity for self-consciousness, but rather narrow AI that is specialized towards specific tasks, we can only see it to be beneficial. We can only see the extension of this AI to other fields to be beneficial. So it's unclear why further development is the tipping point in worsening the harms of existing AI, whereas we told you that new AI would likely have more benefits than harms. On the first area of response, about whether this will be done in a beneficial manner. The first thing that I want to respond to is their claim that AI will only be programmed by elites, that it will only solve the problems of the rich, and that AI will be more expensive over time. Three responses. Firstly, I just want to point out very intuitively that it's not true that the barrier to entry and accessing AI technology is particularly high. Computer science is one of the most widely taught and popular college courses anywhere in the world. Anyone with a laptop has access to a range of learning resources to give them a rudimentary understanding of things like machine learning and the ability to code. The number of people with coding skills is on an upward trend given the number of jobs in the tech sector is rapidly increasing as more people have access to technology. So it's not true to say that AI is restricted to elites and only the rich. In fact, we think that the fact that at this point in time, OpenAI leads the charge in developing AI technology points to the fact that a lot of this code will likely remain open source through further development as well. Now is the time to further develop AI while the code is still open source and while we can promote competition in the industry. Secondly, I would point out that further development increases the incentive to lower barriers to entry. This is because companies want to tap into a broader talent pool of individuals who are likely to lead to more innovations within the industry, which means that there's an incentive to do things like fund university courses or increase access to open source learning software, hence why the code and technology has remained open source thus far. The third response that I want to make is that through economies of scale and through further development, we can actually make AI services much cheaper. As more computer services are dedicated towards AI software and technology, the number of people that can access this technology and the cost at which they can access it is likely to decrease significantly as well. We've already seen this in the past with other kinds of technology. So there's search engines, for example. The final response that I want to make, and this flips their claim, is that AI technology is actually likely to breach the gap between the disparity between the rich and poor in education, because AI can be used as a tool for education and to increase access to learning resources. Their own example of countries that are using AI technology in order to teach children is a perfect example of this. For people who can't afford to go to college or university or hire a teacher of their own, using things like machine learning algorithms that are able to collate the best educational resources into one place and to teach them things. AI that can answer their questions about things like code and software and can actually respond to the questions that they have could be instrumental in giving these people the leg up that they need in order to improve their education. This is the same effect that we saw with search engines. We think AI bridges this disparity. The second thing that they say is that the ability to manually collect data through the use of AI algorithms will lead to privacy violations. Three responses. Firstly, this doesn't require AI. Algorithms are already perfectly competent at determining things like patterns of consumption, so it's unclear why this is exclusive to the further development of AI and not just to harm the status quo. Secondly, private data will still be stored in the servers of companies like Walmart and Google on their side of the house, so it's still vulnerable to hacking. The comparative is that AI are notoriously good at cybersecurity. Their ability to engage in cryptography, which the average human cannot understand, and therefore further securing this data, is a unique benefit to the further development of AI. Thirdly, even if we concede that things like consumer predictive algorithms are inevitable on either side of the house, given the incentives of private companies, even if AI can be used to do this more efficiently, we actually think that that's a good thing, because it means that companies need to collect less personal data to make these kinds of predictive algorithms and decision making. So if Walmart is going to try to predict what you're going to buy, it's better that they do this by collecting less of your personal data than more of it. Finally, on human interaction, I just want to point out this is a very trivial point. If people find it boring to talk to AI because they don't have their own personal experiences, then they just stop talking to AI. Comparatively, I will point out that maybe some people prefer talking to AI. There are plenty of people who get amusement out of talking to chatbots. They should have the option to do so. It's unclear why we would be forcing anyone to talk to a chatbot as opposed to having the option to talk to a normal person. Second area of response on whether the development of AI will be effectively regulated. The problem with proposition in this debate is they seem to believe that the incentive to develop AI and the incentive to regulate AI are mutually exclusive. We actually told you that these two things were positively correlated and gave a number of reasons as to why this was the case. Firstly, there is a greater public scrutiny of AI on our side of the house for few reasons. Firstly, as governments and private companies and people's money gets involved in the development of AI, there's a greater incentive to ensure that the AI that is being developed is being done so in the public interest. Before I move on, I'll take the point.
How will public scrutiny stop oppressive AI systems in places like China and Russia who strip non-consenting users from the right to privacy?
Could you repeat that?
How will public scrutiny stop oppressive AI systems in places like China and Russia who strip non-consenting users from their right to privacy?
Well, authoritarian regimes will use technology in an oppressive way on either side of the house. We think that our ability to combat their use of this oppressive technology through its legitimate use and the benefits outweighs this. On regulation then, the first thing that they say is that this will be used to perpetuate violence. I would point out firstly that the first AI that we developed was the AI to be used in warfare. It was the AI that was used in missile systems. So this AI already exists. Comparatively, the AI that we don't have and have yet to develop and will likely be developed is the kind of AI that leads to better nuclear and missile detection, which means fewer misfires. It's the kind of AI that leads to less collateral damage on our side of the house and therefore less harms if countries do choose to go to war. Secondly, I would point out that on our side of the house, countries are probably less likely to go to war given that they don't fight resource wars. Because they have more effective utilization of these resources as a result of the use of AI. Finally, on unemployment. We told you that this was not a reason to regret the current further development of AI. That AI replacement will likely be gradual, given the rudimentary nature of current AI, that it will not displace the vast majority of people from the jobs that they currently have, and therefore we should not regret it for this reason. For all of these reasons, support the further development of AI.
Yeah. All right, thanks for giving a fine speech. And
Hi, can you see me and hear me? Yeah? Okay. Verbal POIs and he, him pronouns. 3, 2, 1. Our fleeting experiences can never truly satisfy the hedonistic desire for innovative technology and development. We only get pieces of the lives we want to live, bounded pleasures found within a devastatingly transitory world. And yet, on proposition, we firmly believe that it is through these fragments of the human experience that we find meaning and ultimately define ourselves in relation to a collective society. TEAM Sri Lanka not only exploits the inherent notion of inequality in the status quo, but robs what is most important for individuals in society: the ability to long and freely envision an independent and analogous tomorrow. 2 things in this speech. Firstly, actually 3 things in this speech. Firstly, responses to their framing. Secondly, the first theme on the practical theme of comparing our first argument on the harms applied disproportionately to their first argument on efficiency. Second theme then on long-term development harms such as safety of society, including weaponization of AI. Firstly then on their framing. The problematic thing about their framing is that they say in the future, in first, they say they're going to revisit the debate. 2 things we pointed out here. Number 1, if they want to revisit the debate in the future, the harm has already been done. The premise of our case is simple. The likelihood of immediate harm of AI means that we don't want to risk the harm, even if we can revisit this debate in the future. We think the lives of the most vulnerable, especially in terms of perpetuating inequality, is why the harm has already been done at the point in which they revisit the debate in like 40 years. AI, no thank you, has been developed. But secondly, it also means that it is harder to revisit the debate structurally because the development of AI means it is unpredictable and very vague, hence meaning it is very hard to control. First theme then. Our argument here was very simple. It was that the harms are applied disproportionately. The premise of this argument is that the development of AI is coded by the most privileged, which means that it perpetuates further violence, generally for society, but more especially for the people that are the most vulnerable. We gave you 3 mechanisms here. Number 1, in terms of privacy breaches and values. Secondly, in terms of job loss. And finally, in terms of the loss of human experience. The first way in which they respond to the premise of this argument is that artificial intelligence created by OpenAI, so it is largely accessible. I think the premise of this response is that these are individuals that can go to these colleges, can attend these courses in the first place. They never engage with a scenario in which people don't even have money or socioeconomic power to attend these courses. No, thank you. But secondly, even if it is open for the poor, and this is very important, it is very risky for the poor to join the industry in the first place. Just because it is accessible for the poor to join the industry does not mean that the poor have the structural incentive to join the industry, especially given that they're competing against millionaires that have millions of coders within the company. So the resource gap means even if it is accessible for the poor, taking them at their best, they have no incentive to join the industry. Thirdly, the premise of this argument, though, was that the poor are not able to weather against the harms of AI development. Even if we concede them and take them at their best, the harms regarding job loss and the harms regarding in terms of the loss of human experience and privacy breaches and values that are worse for people, poor people that don't need a code at the end of the day, is also largely harmful and applies still. But finally, on the point why in the future it gets cheaper, this is merely a counter assertion in second opposition speaker. They never mechanized to you why the companies have incentives to make this cheaper, especially given that they want to keep this sort of power in terms of resource allocation for themselves in the status quo. How do they respond to our first mechanism in terms of privacy breaches and values? They talk about how they'll have more regulations in the future. 2 things to note here. Number 1, I think largely my previous response on this framing applies here. But secondly, companies oftentimes lobby the government, and this is especially true given that if there's more development, these companies have more power, and a lot of society depends on this AI technology. If you believe or if you buy their point about how efficient AI is, which means that this lobbying is more likely to be worsened on their side, and this regulation point was very, very vague and unnuanced. But secondly, they talk about how humans do it much worse in the first speaker of opposition. They never actually proved this or mechanized to you. This was merely an assertion. All their mechanisms about how effective and precise AI is in their first argument is why privacy breaches using this efficient AI are far worse. We gave you a structural analysis. They just simply assert this with a one-liner. Finally, they talk about algorithms in their second. They talk about how there will be more cybersecurity algorithms. This is precisely the problem with development. If there is cybersecurity development through this industry, it is obviously true that there's going to be developing of hacking, especially given that the incentives never change of these people in the future just because AI is developed. The way in which they respond to the second point about job loss is that it is necessary for human development and that the new jobs are created. 3 things I want to point out. Firstly, it is very, very vague in TEAM Sri Lanka's case. They never prove to you how they can create any jobs. They simply assert this to you through using retrospective analysis. But note how retrospective analysis is never likely to never means that it is certain that there will be new jobs created in the future. just because no thank you, it was created retrospectively, does not mean it guarantees that they're going to create in the future. They simply assert this to you again, and they never weigh with the comparative in the debate. But secondly, these new jobs created, like Jian points out, are often only accessible to the rich. This is given that the new jobs are created are oftentimes jobs like coding or things like machine learning technology, which means that it is again limited to the people that are the rich, but also in terms of not only financial barriers, but in terms of time to develop this AI and the amount of time you're devoting in this technology. Largely, people that are in the poor or like the people that are the most vulnerable oftentimes don't have time for this. But finally, in the status quo, the type of jobs that are replaced are direct in the status quo, no thank you, because we pointed out in Arthur's speech that the jobs that are replaced are the jobs for the most vulnerable that don't require that much amount of knowledge or that much amount of expertise, but is more focused on human labor. Given that they concede that these things are replaced with AI, we think in the status quo, at the end of the day, these people are replaced. That is why at the end of this argument, their job creation is very vague and unmechanized, except in terms of retrospective analysis. Ours is clear and ours is immediate. That is why in terms of likelihood and propensity, but also in terms of the scale of harm, we are winning this point. Finally, in terms of the loss of human experience, we try to dismiss this by saying that AI can be replaced, including sympathy and empathy. Even if it has sympathy and empathy, precisely, that is why the human experience is lost. This is not just about what people perceive, but the argument was more nuanced in the sense that the notion of human communication, the notion that we are one as society, that we communicate, even if you perceive this as human, is something that is much more important in this debate. Finally, they talk about people want people, like the argument or the premise of this argument was that even if people want people on their side, if AI is developed, and given that people are contingent on AI, I'll take you in a moment, it is harder to find humans to communicate with in the first place. Finally, then, I want to move on to their point about overcoming barriers of human mind, but before that, I'll take a POI.
Blue-collar workers are unemployed as a result of automation and not the development of AI, which happens on both sides of the house. Isn't it likely, for the same reasons you talk about in your argument about human interaction, that companies will only want to gradually replace real human workers that interact with customers with AI over time, and therefore give us time to adjust, the economy time to adjust to the eventual unemployment that AI will create?
No, this is not true, right? Oftentimes AI is directly why it leads to people being unemployed. Like given their first argument's premise is that oftentimes jobs that can be done through manual labor and efficiency is what is precisely being replaced. They cannot simply assert this. And even if they're likely to assert this, this is a comparative debate on which side it is more likely that people are unemployed. Of course, people are unemployed on our side, but it is about the number of people that are employed and the type of people that are unemployed that are the most vulnerable. Their first argument here was very, very simple, which was that there's just going to be a lot of efficiency benefits. But we've proven to you this is precisely why the harms worsen on their side. But secondly, there's not much weighing, right? Why is it in this round that you need to buy an increase in efficiency more than the structural harms we give you? Even if we concede their mechanisms, this is a comparative at the end of the day. Finally, then, I want to quickly point out that second speaker of opposition is very uncomparative. They simply assert that there are oppressive governments on our side of the house as well. Obviously, this debate should be one in which there needs to be nuanced weighing. On our side, we've proven to you why if there's AI development, it is far more likely that these oppressive governments have even more power. They talk about how this is more accurate on their side, but it is based on governments having good incentives. Governments with bad incentives won't develop more precise technology. Because we believe that artificial intelligence robs tangible interaction that keeps the most vulnerable alive, we are very proud to stand with the proposition.
All right, thanks, speaker, for that speech. Opposition, which one of you are ready?
Can I cut and see, Kelly? Sorry, can I be heard and seen clearly?
Disconnect?
Hi, just checking that we're audible. Not sure whether we've disconnected.
Yeah,
Okay.
So I'm visually and audibly clear, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Two important questions I want to answer in this speech. Firstly, on why AI is good. Secondly, even if AI is not great, conceding to the proposition's claim, why regulation is something that is more likely on our side of the house and done more effectively. Question then on why AI is good. The first thing that the proposition tells us then is that, well, these markets are likely to be capitalized by the first movers that enter the market, and therefore it's likely that the rich is able to capitalize this industry. A few reasons as to why this is not true. The first is that the capitalization of the industry is likely on their side of the house, because look at the number of companies that exist that develop AI right now. It is extremely low in number, and these are the companies that would likely keep selling the AI that already exists on their side of the house. So the further development is not necessary, but these companies keep selling the AI that they already have, which means that the capitalization of the market is something that is more likely on their side of the house. The second thing I want to point out is that on our side of the house, the capitalization of the market significantly reduces. One is that there is no first mover advantage anymore, because the funding is given to different actors, and importantly, there is an incentive to give to different companies in status quo. The reason for this is simple. Corporations or even governments themselves and investors themselves understand that they shouldn't put all their eggs in one basket. They're likely to invest in many other different corporations that exist, which means that the competition increases over time between corporations. The third reason is because different companies start investing in different markets. The reason for this is simple. One is that the sunk cost significantly reduces the more developments that you make in AI. Secondly, is that there are new undiscovered fields that exist, which means that companies have a natural incentive to enter the field because they know there are covered fields, and you only have the ability to do that on our side of the house when you allow for the further development of AI. The third reason I want to point out is that the sunk cost is something that is the opportunity cost of the sunk cost that needs to be made is something that is made worth it on our side of the house when the initial cost is something that is lower, when you know that there's going to be a constant demand for AI, which means that competitors are likely to enter the market on our side of the house. Here I want to quickly point out that even if we have more competitors, why it's likely to be accessible, why this technology is likely to be accessible to more people on our side of the house, because the consolidation of this technology by the richest people is something that is likely on their side, because the technology already exists. Development means that they find ways to make the cost of production extremely minimal, which means your ability to make this accessible is greater. Secondly, is that the demand increases, which means that you have a broader group of individuals that you need to cater towards to meet this demand. Thirdly, is that more competitors entering itself means that it creates a race to the bottom to make this technology accessible, which means that access to this technology is something that is likely to be benefiting the most vulnerable stakeholders on our side of the house. So we win on this metric already. Capitalization reduces and the number of individuals who have access to this technology is higher. The second thing that they tell you here is that job losses are likely to happen. The first thing is that this is true of any development that is not AI as a whole. Even when the internet was created, it probably created some level of jobs. This proves why humans have the capacity to anticipate the risk that is associated with the further development of AI, which means that this is something that you can precautionarily prevent this harm for. The reason for this is that the development of AI itself is something that is going to happen in the most gradual form, and it's something that happens slowly. You don't just develop AI overnight. It takes time to develop AI, which means within this time period, you are able to create alternative forms of jobs, for example, or you're able to prevent this harm and anticipate this risk, which means that governments have an incentive to create jobs. Secondly, is that job losses weaken co-opt the mechanism of creating more jobs on our side of the house. The reason for this is simple, because one, you have more markets that you can discover for, which means there are undiscovered markets that exist right now. So, for example, creating self-driving cars created a new industry itself for self-driving cars, where you need to employ people to sell these products, for example, which means that you create more jobs. The second reason as to why you create more jobs is that these companies itself create more branches of the same corporation. The reason for this is that the cost of production goes down, which means your ability to create branches increases. This is exactly what happened with things like ATMs, for example, when they were first created. The third thing I want to point out is that even if there's a marginal job loss on our side of the house, we would argue this is for the best, because look at the jobs that they're talking about. These are blue collar jobs that are extremely exploitative and exploit individuals. On our side of the house, it creates a collective pressure on the government to create things like education opportunities, for example, to increase the opportunities so they can access things like white collar jobs on our side of the house, which means that the kind of job losses that occur on our side is for the benefit. Even things like soldiers losing their jobs is probably for the better. They don't have to risk their life anymore. They can find other alternative means of jobs on our side of the house. Even if job loss occurs in the short term, is the fact that in the long term we have more jobs. Even if there is a short-term harm that is created for individuals, the quality of life of individuals is greater on our side of the house when they're able to get to better markets, which means that this is also an independent reason as to why we win this. The third thing that they tell you under this question is in terms of military technology. One, human cost reduces. This is inherently a good thing. The second thing I want to point out is that the development of AI has already happened, and this is symmetric, i.e. the development that has already happened in the past. And all of the examples of using semi-autonomous weapons in terms of wars, for example, is a likely harm on either side of the house, given that these are created. On our side of the house, now you're able to create things like regulation that does not exist right now. Things like what wars you can use these semi-autonomous weapons for is something that is only likely on our side of the house when you further develop AI, because it necessitates the creation of these regulations. The third thing I want to point out is that bad actors already have a head start in status quo, because the problem is countries like Russia, for example, are further ahead of the US when it comes to the military advancements that they have made. This is true of any other rogue states that exist right now. On our side of the house, the further development of AI is necessary, because when they're in the trajectory of development, that is when it creates a mutually assured destruction of using these in terms of warfare, for example, because you know they're developing as well and they haven't altered, which means that it creates a trajectory where it does not give leverage to these countries to use this technology on our side of the house. But there's just independent reasons as to why companies don't want to, countries don't want to go to war, because the cost of developing AI is extremely high. The development of AI is itself hard, and wars are something that is unpredictable. I want to weigh this clash thing. On our side of the house, there's a guaranteed benefit. The way the third proposition gives you is that, well, there's an unpredictable guaranteed harm. But I would weigh this against the guaranteed benefit that on our side of the house, because the harm is something that can be accounted for. One, the regulation on the existing AI, but secondly, the regulation on the new AI that is likely to be created on our side of the house is only likely. And if I can prove you this, we win on that metric as well. Which moves me on to the second question in terms of regulation. Firstly, they tell us that legislation that exists right now is enough, and they also, on the other hand,
I think we're back. I'm really disconnected.
sorry, what's the last thing you heard me say?
Hello?
Waji.
Hi, sorry. Just to check, are we connected back? Can you hear and see me?
Can hear you. Yeah.
What was the last thing you heard me say?
So like, what I was saying before is like you cut out truly like seconds before what is it? You were fully audible until the very moment that you dropped from the call. And the last thing that we got you saying, well, at least for myself, my panelists can also say, was you were talking about the marginal difference in accountability relative to accountability that already exists.
Okay. Yeah. Second question then, in terms of why regulation improves on our side of the house, here I want to prove to you why, one, the regulation of existing AI improves on our side, which is something that they never proved to us. But secondly, why further development of AI itself is something that is regulated for. The first thing that they tell you here is that legislation that exists right now is enough. On the other hand, they tell us, well, there are problems with existing AI itself. Which of these things is true? We would argue that the former is true, where legislation is not enough in status quo, so there is a need to push for legislation and regulation on either side of the house. Firstly, this is something that is likely because there's a consistent push with the collective action that exists on our side of the house. But secondly, deregulation is something that is likely on their side of the house because corporations are able to justify this as a benefit that corporations are able to justify this when the entire segment itself stalls. For all of these reasons, we win on why AI itself is good, but why regulation is better. Proposed.
All right, thanks so much. Whenever you're ready.
Hi, just checking that you can hear me.
Yep, you're fine.
Great, thank you. What are the paths to victory for the opposition in this debate? One, proving that the further development of artificial intelligence is going to gain a huge amount of benefits for society that outweigh the harms that were provided by the proposition. Second, combating proposition's claim on unemployment and flipping their claims on unemployment as well as this technology becoming expensive to prove why we actually bridge the gap between the rich and the poor and why you're actually able to create more jobs. And thirdly, proving why, even if artificial intelligence is bad, why we get better regulation of artificial intelligence and why that is inherently a good thing. Before I move into those three paths to victory though, a few things are weighing at the top of this debate. The first is that we want to make clear that the problems of artificial intelligence that they point out are with artificial intelligence that already exists and artificial intelligence that has already been developed. It is not necessarily true then, and they also have not given us the analysis why, the further development of artificial intelligence will follow this same pattern and will exacerbate these issues or be the tipping point to exacerbate these issues. Second point of weighing, comparatively, artificial intelligence can be the solution to the current level of artificial intelligence. Better defensive technology and better cybersecurity will mean that you're able to solve the issues right now. Perhaps it is true that hacking will also develop, but historically we've always seen security develop faster than hacking. We see no reasons why this trend is going to change. Third, the positive benefits of extending AI to new fields such as medicine or climate change that came down the bench, which is an unresponded unique benefit that just helps a lot of people and that should be weighed quite heavily in this debate. First clash then, in terms of whether development of artificial intelligence in and of itself is a good thing. The analysis I want to deal with here first is in terms of what the context of artificial intelligence development is going to be like. Here's where we think proposition's lack of response damns them because of the fact that they don't respond to our analysis as to why it is very unlikely that the artificial intelligence industry is going to be monopolized. Because it is only on our side of the house that you allow for new companies to enter said market, therefore raising the competition and allowing a lower barrier to entry for the vast majority of people. Here's where all our benefits of artificial intelligence still matter. The efficiency you get, the speed you get, the fact that you're able to unlearn biases, and the fact you're able to overcome human bias. The weighing here is important. It is to say that on both sides of the house, people are going to want to use computers and people are going to want to use algorithms. The algorithms that they use on side opposition are algorithms that on proposition are algorithms that exist in status quo. That is to say, algorithms that are not self-learning and can't unlearn biases. On our side, AI is able to unlearn biases. There's two important flips that win us this clash, which is that Chanidu analysis that you can use AI as a learning tool to bridge the gap between the rich and cheaper, and you now have privacy, things like because use neural networks to get that information. So that's the analysis as to why development of AI in and of itself is a good. It's flipping their argumentation on unemployment and why unemployment will be low. There are 4 reasons we gave entry, and it's unlikely to replace a lot of jobs anytime soon. Second, that there's likely to be more public scrutiny of AI on our side, which means more money given to governments to retain workers. 3, more jobs are created from companies using the profit savings to continue expanding their companies. And 4, the transition to full AI will be gradual, which means you still need people in the interim. All of this is outweighed by the analysis we gave you that AI is likely to become cheaper because when new firms enter the market, competition goes up and price goes down, as well as the fact that more jobs are created because when you have a booming sector, there's a larger demand for these jobs, which means there's a larger incentive to create these jobs, giving jobs to people. On our worst of cases, maybe one generation gets unemployed, but their kids get very cushy jobs as execs working or like coders working for these companies. Final clash then on which side gets better regulation. Look, we think we prove very clearly that more usage and more investment is to create government intervention and more investor intervention. The way here is that bad tech exists on both sides of the house. They eliminate the incentive to regulate said technology as well as do things like exacerbate war because they are unable to use AI to reduce the necessity to engage in war. For all of these reasons, we think we've won this debate quite clearly for those 3 parts opposed.
All right, thanks so much. Gov, reply whenever you.
Okay. If everyone's ready, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. The scary thing about artificial intelligence is that there is absolutely no guarantee that the technology will be able to be used safely, responsibly, and productively without harming individuals along the way. So when it comes to things like cybersecurity, for example, there's absolutely no guarantee that you're going to face better cyber attacks coded by AI as well, right? Note this debate then comes down to proving the personal incentives and likelihood of future development, as well as the comparative benefits and harms. TEAM Sri Lanka banked their entire case on assertions and try to escape their burden by noting that as soon as something goes haywire, they'll try to revisit the motion. Opposites in the cop-out where they try and frame our harms out by noting scrutiny, but never actually deal with the specific harms that we forwarded, which is why we're proud to stand on proposition. A couple of things I'm going to be doing. First, on our meta-debating, and second, I'm going to talk about the controversial question on which side of the house best protects the most vulnerable in the status quo. First, on meta-debating. The first thing that they continuously told us down the bench is the idea that anyone can access AI, and they told you that we gave no responses. This is untrue because of 3 reasons that we continuously told you that we heard no responses to. First, just because you have coding skills, you can contribute to building AI systems. I might have been coding classes, I might have been taking coding classes. That doesn't mean I can suddenly operate and code middle-out compression systems by myself. That means they don't have any other responses to our claim regarding individuals not having access to AI because of the niche nature and complexity of AI systems themselves. They like to point to OpenAI as a clear example, which is funny because OpenAI literally is under Microsoft, brought off by the richest of the rich. But second, even if any random person can code AI, they cannot stand against the rich elites who have multiple coders underneath them, the top of the top who specialize in AI applications. It's very, very clear why then the rich are likely to hold the monopoly over AI applications, leading to things like price gouging and making sure it's only accessible to the top of the top, harms that Sri Lanka refused to engage with. Third, they never mechanized why this is a benefit, especially because the premise that all individuals have implicit bias that's reflected within these algorithms doesn't change. That means individuals still have biased opinions, and since AI is coded by these individuals, they will still have biased opinions anyways. The second thing I want to note is their idea about how AI becomes cheaper in the future. Note that things like autonomous cars, medical technology, user data collection coded by AI are not going to be cheap, likely exclusive to the most elite to access the most convenient, effective, and efficient services. This is a self-digging grave because the better and more beneficial proposition can paint these services are, it means the higher likelihood that these services are offered only to the very rich, as AI developments are likely to be long-term projects that require insane amounts of things like R&D funds that we told you you need to compensate for the massive amounts of money you invested initially. It's not going to be cheap anytime soon. Then they tell you that they're going to stopping development means people care less about regulation. This is untrue, and Ops OMEC proves this. Presumably, regulation of AI exists under both sides of the house. If people are using AI to harm others directly or is used as a lucrative way to create money or disinformation, we can still combat that under our side. The harm exists under their side because of the fact that you expose more individuals to AI collection, which means that it becomes more accessible to more individuals. But at the end of the day, are only accessible to the very top. You don't create more jobs gradually just because you have AI systems, because it's going to be directly controlled by the people at the top. You're competing against the rich who have the ability to ask the rich friends, for example, to use their connections to get into these companies. The controversial question then, opposition only gives you a couple of points. It's telling you that eventually AI might become cheaper. The vulnerable can utilize AI to forward themselves. It can regulate things like discrimination. The trend among these responses is that they simply assert these things, that they will be accessible. But even if they were, we told you why there likely exists a high barrier to entry because of the lucrative nature of AI tech. We gave you a multitude of reasons as to why the most vulnerable are more likely to be harmed under side opposition. Things like oppressive governments in China and Russia who are likely to use this to oppress their own citizens. Things like job loss. They can't just claim that it's exploited it anyways because we have capital to create better regulations as well. And things like war and violence, which no, they sneakily never respond to because it's a clear harm to the public and their lives in wars. This independently wins us the debate because harms of increased violence in war is something detrimental to the most vulnerable states that cannot access this. Artificial intelligence robs tangible interactions that keeps the most vulnerable alive. We're proud to stand on proposition.
Right. Thanks so much, for Gav reply for a fine speech. And thank you so much, everybody, for a fantastic round. Once again, wanted to give a massive congratulations to the teams who reached the final of Zimbabwe WSDC. Give yourselves a massive round of applause. What's going to happen now is that myself and the panel are going to go into the deliberation breakout room and we're going to adjudicate. The results will be announced in the finals presentation Zoom call, so you don't need to wait here for an OA or anything. Go get rest or whatever it is that school